Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast, where every week we bring you interesting and exciting stories straight to your doorstep. Hello, it's us, your story delivery guy. I am, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we're here to tell you a story. Third episode, boys. We got our third episode of our Robin Hood in space story. What story elements did you guys have?
I have unique artifact.
I have wild card.
And I have happy ending. Finally, a happy ending after all these sad endings. I feel like we've had a couple of sad endings recently. Does anyone want to start? Does anyone want to give us people a little recap? We're basically just telling the story of Robin Hood in space. You know, there's Icor, which is a magic that kind of comes from people. There's AJ. Is that the name of our Robin Hood character,
Yep.
Reed? It's
Yeah.
very, very heroic name. We have the spaceships that represent all of our sort of famous characters. Friar Tuck being Tucker being a giant sort of habitarium. You know, different ships. If you kind of imagine Robin Hood's Merry Men, different ships representing the different main characters and their kind of contributions and their styles. It's kind of a fun idea.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone want to start with their story element, or should I jump straight to the happy ending?
I'd like to jump in with the unique artifact, partly because it kind of brings some things together.
Okay.
It's my unique artifact is the cradle. And this is a device with a containment field powered by an antimatter-like contingency, so to speak. It's a mechanism that enabled the inventor to capture quantities of the force, the energy emitted during an outpouring of Icor, especially in battle, in Icor-enabled activity, so to speak. It's kind of hard to explain, but I'm thinking like if you have the picture of like the Ghostbusters and they've got their little containment box and they use their cross beam things to capture the ghost and they stick it in this thing and shut it up. Okay. The cradle is sort of a containment device. And A.J. Jones was part of a unit specifically when he was in his compulsory military service that had been set up specifically with these the Feng Shui aficionados, the fighting style, these that Seth introduced in the second episode, where they used a fighting style that they could use positioning to utilize this flow of Icor,
Right.
and kind of enhancing the use of it. And it was one of these masters of this fighting style that was a scientist and inventor that came up with the idea of trying to capture this power, you know, kind of during the use of it, so to speak. And then, so A.J. Jones was in action, witnessed this, and also the demise of this scientist, this fighter, this inventor, as he fell in battle. And Jones managed to secure the cradle and conceal it. And he realized the potential power, falling into the wrong hands. By this time, he had already was really nervous about back home because he had lost touch. He had not heard from the steward, the guy that was in charge of running the place back home. And his dad had died, and this steward, the steward's family had been working with his family like for generations. And so when he had lost touch, he sensed something was wrong. And the basic, like Robin of Locksley going home and finding that evil Prince John and had appointed the sheriff of Nottingham, Shotsky, the thug that was kind of running things and had turned out his people and had taken over his operations. And he was kind of a outlaw by this time, but he had in his possession this cradle and had this old military transport that he had kind of commandeered and managed to get away to the nebula, the Sherwood Forest kind of thing. And they had kind of places to hide that were not sensor friendly, and so to speak. But anyway, he has this device, this cradle, and it's like packed with these outpourings of ichor. And he's still not entirely sure how to make use of it, but he recognizes this thing is holding a great deal of power.
So how different is this from the batteries the battery statues?
Yeah, the battery statues, this is different in that they don't have the actual ichor that solidifies, but they just have captured the energy that
Gotcha.
came forth in battle.
Gotcha.
And it's completely, it's much more portable as well, too.
Right. So this is actually captured. So the ichor kind of burns up once it kind of exits.
Right.
Wherever it comes from, it kind of burns up and converts to this energy. So the batteries just have the energy where the cradle actually has the ichor. Much more higher concentration. I would say that there would probably be some research done in like distillation.
Yeah.
To make it even more concentrated. That's kind of interesting.
But it's, of course, Jones has been busy, trying to dodge the authorities and trying to figure out how am I going to reestablish my position back home. And now I've got these other people that have turned out, the merry men.
Right.
We got Friar Tuck. We got Tucker in his, his cruise liner or whatever his Habitorium. I love that name. That's a great name for his ship.
Yeah, it's like a forest.
Yeah.
A floating forest. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll go next. I wasn't sure how Reed's unique artifact would come out and possibly affect what I had if I needed to change something, but I think it'll work out great. I had wild card, and for wild card, I picked unique weapon.
Great.
So long as that wasn't... No one had that last time, did they?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So given it's Robin Hood, right? But it's in space, so we have to bring in something that resembles him using the longbow, correct?
Yeah. There has to be some sort of longbow-esque thing.
Right. And so kind of with this fighting style, you have kind of like the front-facing kind of force of where the energy is flowing and not flowing. And maybe this ties the cradle into how maybe AJ develops this longbow, right? It's a device, creates the longbow. Now, whether it uses the cradle or not, but it then is a device that is kind of emerging onto the battlefield where instead of forces having to kind of position and fight, face on to face on, it's something that with the right trajectory, right, it'll arc up like its attack, at a greater distance, pinpointing something, behind lines, kind of like they use the longbow where they could mow people down from a much farther distance given the strength of the bow and the angle, and they'd get it to kind of arc over and hit its target.
Right.
So kind of simplistically, it's it's the longbow somehow attached to it. Maybe it's unique to his ship, and maybe more of his people are picking them up, and it's something that they're bringing where they can kind of, hide in the forest and hit targets, much farther away or where it's not seen. So long as they have the coordinates, they can kind of adjust their longbow.
Right.
And pinpoint targets, normally that might be safe behind, these lines. And, some of the energy attacks or whatever that might come, one position to another. And now you have this that kind of arcs in over top and pinpoints a target that then it doesn't expect it because everything has been kind of this squadron, that squadron, head on, kind of coming at it, but not taking into account that, because if you were in the back, right, you're kind of pushing and directing these other squadrons. And now they have this longbow that'll kind of pinpoint targets farther away from, a different angle. Does that make sense?
Yeah. When I'm, sometimes when the people are talking about different things that are happening in different wars and skirmishes around the world, the term that kept coming up in my mind when you were talking was a standoff weapon. These, they have these, the use of drones or different missiles that are kind of like fire and forget. They're high tech, you can let them fly, and you can go off about your business. You don't have to, like a tow missile, a tow anti-tank missile. It trails out literally a fiber optic cable, and you just track it right. But you got to literally keep exposed while you track it right in to the target. Well, these standoff weapons are much, the next generation, so to speak. You can, fire and forget kind of thing. But that's what, I don't know, that was just an analogy that struck into my mind when you were talking. Kind of a standoff weapon that changes the dynamic on the battlefield.
Yeah.
I like it. So let's review the my Robin Hood text file here on my desktop. Oh, of course, there's nothing written there. That's terrifying. Okay. The lowest point, betrayal. The authorities finally get serious. Massive manhunts, rewards, treachery from within or without. Sometimes an inside betrayal, a jealous comrade, a false monk. Robin is wounded, captured, or cornered. Several merry men may die. The noose seems certain. So this is kind of the place that we are now. Like right now, our AJ character is kind of hopping along. Everything seems to be sort of going up for him, But the reality is that the leader that he served, right, our King Richard, right, the reason why he was okay with being conscribed into the military, he is not the sort of the clear and present leader of this area, I don't know if we actually decided what sort of government conglomerate currently resides in this area, but clearly it's one that has leaders, because we have what's the name of the sheriff's the analog?
I call him Shotsky. He's just kind of a thug, a strong arm.
Yeah. But my thought is that there is, in fact, because if we're going about the analog here, I mean, the Robin Hood story that I remember, eventually we find out that, or is that Ivanhoe, that King Richard has been captured and he needs to be ransomed? Is that Ivanhoe?
I think that's Ivanhoe.
Well, but there have been retellings of the, obviously.
Well, Ivanhoe takes place inside of or alongside the Robin Hood.
Absolutely.
Because Robin Hood is in Ivanhoe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at some point in time, it's discovered that the good guys who AJ originally went and fought with are waylaid. And are we going to have them going on a crusade? Because that would be weird.
Yeah.
In space.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, given the way that it goes, there's some conflict, right? There's some other greater conflict between several of the different, federations or powers that be in space, right?
Right.
I mean, obviously that's where he was at, in some kind of way of control over different systems and their resources or whatever that is, if we want to, make it more a regular war instead of some kind of, like ethnic cleansing crusade or some religious thing. But
I've been kind of thinking of this thing as like humans, Earthmen have been out there doing this thing for a while now. And then at some point they bumped up against, whoever else is out there. We are not alone, whether it's the bugs or, and then there's fighting without and fighting within.
Regardless of what it is, I mean, it could even be that he is just, it takes a long time to get back. It could be that
right.
The Richard the Lionhearted character, his ships and his fleets don't have the I-Corps to return. Or it could be that the statues that they had in their ships were damaged and therefore they're not they're only traveling a tenth the speed of light instead of light speed. And so it's taking them 10 years to get back instead of 1 year.
Yeah.
It could even be something as simple as that, with our sort of Prince John character beginning to sort of set up maybe like I'd say one of the things that are close to the end is that another band of sort of Robin Hood-esque people appears, except they steal from the rich and the poor alike, right? This is part of the kind of tragic betrayal
Yeah.
area, right? Maybe some like the merry men are seeing kind of a great influx, and they think, we have enough ships, we have enough strategy, like we can do this now. And so maybe they go to try and overthrow the bad guy, and then in like a serious betrayal, like a bunch of them they all get double crossed, And
Yeah.
so a bunch of
Yeah,
their
because they're
ships
brigands, and if, this party is paying more, then
right,
we're out for the
exactly.
profit.
People who don't actually care, people who are just in it for the money. And then what he wants to do is he wants to set what our Prince John character wants to do is he wants to set them up so that when the Richard the Lionhearted fleet comes back, they will essentially attack them and waylay them so that John can again be sort of portrayed as the good guy, even if Richard comes back. Because Richard's been sending this whole time that like this guy, who used to work for you has been attacking us and waylaying us, trying to cast him in this light of being a scoundrel. And so this scoundrelly thing happens, and it gets to, he betray these other characters betray everyone. Tucker's ship gets destroyed. The Tucker character barely survives. Little John's ship gets destroyed. A bunch of the ships get destroyed, and they're like cool modules. A bunch of their longbows get destroyed, and like what's left is Robin Hood's kind of main attack vessel and his longbow and the cradle, obviously. Because one of the interesting things about this is that even though it's a happy ending, the story of Robin Hood ends with Robin Hood getting injured, kind of like Jesse James, by like a compatriot, and then basically bleeding to death. And then eventually part of the legends talk about him firing an arrow out of a window and telling Little John that like wherever it lands, that's where you should bury me.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things is that I have happy ending. So we can have this sad ending, but also have a happy ending, right? Because of the fact that we've set it up that the Robin Hood is both the ship and the person. We can have the mythos of Robin Hood end, aka maybe he uses the I-Core. He's able to use the I-Core there at the end or close to the end to power the longbows and make them fire twice to 3 times as long as normal, which is already insane, and then run away with the ship kind of critically damaged, and the ship is destroyed, and the Robin Hood statue, which presides in the ship, is destroyed, but AJ is not destroyed. Right. And so that being kind of the happy ending is that all of the characters, the legacy of Robin Hood is destroyed because without their ships and their techs and stuff, it would take them years to sort of get back up. So, but instead they kind of pave the way for something. And maybe that's paving the way to tell the returning force who our Prince John character was. Maybe that's returning to, to kill the Prince John character or the Sheriff of Nottingham character. I think that Robin Hood himself, while he opposes Prince John, I don't think that the honor of Robin Hood would allow him to actually kill Prince John, right? Because he's royalty, right? He's the king's brother. Even though he doesn't like him, even though he thinks he's evil, he's not going to kill him. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's the same thing I think with clergy. Is there's like a certain thing where he won't kill clergy even though they're evil.
Yeah.
Where I think the Sheriff of Nottingham is kind of off the table. But anyways, this is kind of how I see it wrapping up, where they're sort of a last stand as they're betrayed and then hunted into the
Nebula.
into the nebula of Nottingham, and they're kind of fighting, and one by one they kind of get picked off, and maybe they're all kind of gathering onto the main ship, and so with each person that gets onto the ship gets more nimble, the ship gets better equipped, because they're all masters at their own specific thing anyways. And eventually they have to jettison out and leave, but they do something. Maybe they use the stored ichor in the cradle and a longbow, combine the two together somehow, and are able to sort of send a message out using it.
So I was thinking one way that could happen is perhaps they're betrayed, but perhaps they also get a bit of information of where the Richard character is laywayed. Right. And so then they were betrayed, they're being chased, and they use that last ditch effort to basically send a blast to change the tide in the people laywaying the Richard character, who's able to return. However, Prince John is royalty, whatever it is, it might take out the sheriff, or then the sheriff is caught, as in like basically the patsy. Right.
Oh, yeah.
So being he's royalty, he's going to be playing these powers, but then obviously, King John comes back, but we know historically that inside of that, John takes the throne again eventually. So regardless of how that goes, John kind of has his I's dotted and his T's crossed, so that in that return, it shows that, there was these brigands, they were causing a ruckus. He was trying to do certain things about it and kind of pass it on to the sheriff as, the one that stabbed us in the back.
Right. No, absolutely.
Right. So I think maybe if that seems to work.
Yeah. But the happy ending, the sad part of it is that the ships are all destroyed. Right. So Robin Hood's merry men are disbanded and broken apart. But the happy ending part of that is that all of the primary characters who represent those ships, who in which those ships had any power, are preserved. Right. They're still alive. And so they kind of go on. And it's not like, I want people to understand, it's not like, oh, my ship's destroyed. It's okay. It'll only take me 2 months to save up enough money to buy another one. It's like, no. This ship that AJ has that he brings back is like worth billions of dollars. Like, there's no just getting another one.
Right.
You don't just get another Titan class warship. That doesn't happen. So it's a true death. The ships being destroyed is a true death to that character's potential and to what that character represented.
Mm-hmm.
But the character themselves are preserved, and so in that way it's a happy ending. Right? They can't go on as the merry men anymore because the ships are gone, but it's a happy ending because at least the characters are preserved.
And the corruption has been overturned, and the Prince John character has had to find a way to save face and appear to be, his Richard's faithful brother after all. And we have to get rid of that pesky Shotsky, who was just he just took things way too far. And
right, exactly.
Yeah,
cool. I like that. I like that as a happy ending. Do you guys like that as a happy ending?
Yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Wait It Gets Better. If you like this episode, let us know. Send us an email at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. Message us on Twitter at @getsbettercast. If you want to be on the show, if you want to be shouted out, just shout us out on either of those things. We'd be happy to shout you out. If you have any good ideas or any bad ideas, let us know. And until next week, when we gather together to talk about this story, about what we liked and didn't like, don't forget to wait, because it gets better.